There may be a time when you want to display some code to the users of your Rails application, and you want to make it pretty with some syntax highlighting like I do on the RailsCast site here. Well, how do you do that? There are a number of different choices to make, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at first, so I hope in this episode to clear some of that up and let you choose the right tool for the job. Now, there are a number of JavaScript libraries out there which can help with this, but I won't be covering that here because it's not really Rails specific. Here I want to show you 3 different utilities you can use that are popular in the Rails world. Now, the first one I want to show you here is the classic code ray, which is just a simple gem install code ray to get it. There's no other external dependencies. It's written completely in Ruby, and it's also very fast. And on the downside, though, it's somewhat limited on its features and the languages it supports. So here's the list right here, but if it does what you need in your application, then I think it's a great way to go. The next one I want to show you here is called Ultraviolet. This is also a gem, but it has a couple of external dependencies, so it can be a little difficult to install. It's also quite a bit slower than CodeRay, but the advantage of the, Ultraviolet is the feature set. It has some amazing capabilities because it can import basically any language or theme from TextMate. So this allows you to have access to all of TextMate's languages and themes, which is quite a vast collection. It comes with 50 languages and 20 themes, and it's pretty easy to just import whatever TextMate theme you use. Now, if you do decide to go with Ultraviolet for your syntax highlighting, I recommend you check out Harsh. This is a Rails plugin which provides a nice helper method for displaying the code inside your view, and some rake tasks for installing themes and managing them. And also it has in the README some nice instructions for installing Ultraviolet, so check that out if you like the feature set that Ultraviolet provides. A third popular choice for syntax highlighting is Pigments. Now this is somewhat unique because it's actually a Python library, and it provides a nice command line utility though, so you can easily execute that through your Rails application, just passing some code to it, and it'll spit out the highlighted version in return. Now it's a really full-featured library and it's well supported. It's used by a lot of major sites out there, so if you want something that's really solid, give this a look. However, it is pretty slow when going through Rails, so consider that you may need to do some kind of caching if you use Pigments in your application. Now, if you do decide on the Pigments library, I highly recommend you check out the Highlight plugin available for Rails. It's a great way to just a wrapper around the Pigments library so you can execute that through a simple helper method inside your view. Now, it does recommend that you do some caching here because it is rather slow. One thing you may want to try, I haven't really experimented with this, is possibly doing a SHA of the code and using that as the key of the cache. That way it auto expires when the code changes. That's just an idea. I don't know how well it would work. So that's an overview of the 3 libraries I recommend you take a look at and consider, which is CodeRay, Ultraviolet, and Pigments. Now, I was sort of curious about how these compared speed-wise because you may be rendering the code quite a bit in your application, and you may be concerned about whether you have to cache this content or not. So I decided to do a little benchmark, somewhat primitive here, but basically this just takes the content of this file itself and parses it 50 times through CodeRay, Ultraviolet, and Pigments. So for Pigments, it just uses the Pigmentize command executable. And here's the results when I run that script. As you can see, there's quite a big difference between these. CodeRay is obviously the fastest one at less than 0.3 seconds, Ultraviolet at almost 5 seconds, and Pigments at a whopping 16 seconds. So take that into consideration when you're choosing which one to go with. If you're doing caching, this may not be a big deal, so it depends on your application. Now, throughout the rest of this episode, I want to go into detail in showing you how to get CodeRay set up in your Rails application. I'm going with this one because it's the easiest one by far to install and set up, and it's fast enough so you don't have to worry about caching. I may cover the other ones in future episodes, though. What I have here is a simple blogging application, and I want to add the ability to add nicely syntax highlighted code snippets into the blog article content. So when the author edits a blog post, I want them to be able to add a little code block here, and let's just allow them to specify a language like this. Let's say Ruby, and then just put whatever code they want here. And then when they submit this, it'll be displayed in a nice code snippet in the content here. First, I'll just start off by adding the CodeRay gem to my environment config file. Because this is a Rails 2 application, I'm not working in Rails 3 here. If you were, then it would be in the gem file you'd want to add this. So we'll just do config gem CodeRay. And I'm actually end up going to use a text style later on, so I'll add red cloth here as well, so that I can use that. There is a red cloth with CodeRay gem out there, which allows you to combine them, but I like doing it manually to give me more control in how the syntax works. So here's the article show page where I'm outputting the content of the article right here. So I'm just outputting the raw HTML content, and this is where I want it to parse out the code tag and use CodeRay for syntax highlighting inside of there. And to do this, I'm just going to add a new helper method called CodeRay, and then just pass this in through that. To save me some typing, I'm just going to paste this CodeRay method into our application helper file. As you can see, it's actually pretty simple. All it's doing is just taking in some text as a string, calling gsub on it. So what gsub does is it finds everything that matches this and replaces it with whatever is returned inside this block. So you can see that it's looking for the code tag, and then it has some parentheses here, so it's optionally searching for the language. And what it's doing here is calling CodeRay inside this block, so it's going to basically parse out the code snippet that's in between here, which is $3 is going to be whatever in these parentheses here, and passing in the language, which is $2, and that's optional. And then it's just going to call div on this, which will return a div version of the highlighted code, and then so this is just telling it what kind of CSS styling to do on the syntax highlighting. So CodeRay has a number of different options and methods you can call here, but I'll leave it up to you to investigate that. I really think the div option is one of the best. You can also go with a table. And then finally we need to add a style sheet. As you can see, I've already added a CodeRay.css style sheet here, and this is just a custom one I made for doing sort of a RailsCast theme for the coloring. So you can use this one if you want. It's easy enough to just change and fiddle with these color values for the various options in your theme. And then of course, to get that style sheet to work, we need to include it in our head tag here in our layout file. So we'll just say CodeRay here, and then we just reload our page here, and voila, there's our custom code with our pretty syntax highlighting. Now you often want to add syntax highlighting with something like text style or markdown. So for text style here, we could just call textileize, and then that way it'll use red cloth to add textile markup to this article content. It knows we're doing that outside of our CodeRay method. So to get this portion of the code content so it doesn't get parsed by red cloth, what we have to do is just add a simple content tag here called no textile, and that way it'll wrap that in a no textile tag so it doesn't end up parsing it. And we could try that out by editing our article here. Let's add some items here, and let's actually change our code up a bit to add a method call so that it's just a little cooler to see the different syntax coloring. And there we go. So now we have our ordered list or unordered list for our text style, and it's also embedding the code properly inside of here. And that's it for this episode. As you can see, it's very easy to use CodeRay in your Rails application for some quick syntax highlighting.